Good morning, everyone. Kamira Megi here from Alico, and welcome to Advanced Composing and Animation Techniques with Adobe After Effects. Today is April 2nd, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and we are going to look at some of the Adobe After Effects features that usually I don't teach it in a normal class. Teach it in the advanced classes such as Studio Techniques 1 or 2. So I'm going to close my screen here. And before I get into what I'm going to create today, let me use my drawing tool. Maybe this can give you guys some ideas. Today, there will be two parts, of course. The part one, I'm going to create a solar system. So I'm going to create some sort of like sun, very glowing, powerful sun. And then somewhere I'm going to create Earth, and I'm going to create Moon. Of course, Moon will kind of orbit the sun, not completely orbiting it, just a little bit. And the sun, of course, has a lot of harmful rays, and these rays will come in and hit the Earth, and Earth kind of glows, and it goes through the crust of the planet. I try to simplify it, not using any kind of texture. Everything I'm going to do is going to be in Adobe After Effects. Probably I'm going to maybe import one photo of just a background with a bunch of little dots on it, make it more like a star. Different galaxies. Otherwise, if you don't want to add that one, you don't need it to. So everything will be done in Adobe After Effects from scratch. In this exercise, what I want to show to students is using certain filters that is not really customary. For example, this filters like a stroke, filters like fill, or using the adjustment layer. Also using something called the transparency mode. I'm not talking about the opacity. I'm talking about the transparency or preserved transparency, like in Photoshop. So this exercise is probably very long if I want to create everything from scratch and dig in there, but I'll try to create a few elements, and then you guys will see how the rest of it goes. So the first thing I need to do, I need to start a new composition. Now, my composition, the main composition, of course, going to be a bit of a different size. I'm going to start with something like 1920 1080 because I do need the resolution for this thing. I will leave the aspect ratio alone. I'll keep my pixel aspect ratio to a square pixels. And when it comes to the number of the frames, I'm going to change it to 24 frames, make it more like a cinematic, and also save myself some bandwidth. Resolution, I'm going to leave it to full, obviously. A starting time code is 0. And when it comes to duration, I'll go with a 10 at the moment. The background, I'm just going to change it into black. There we go. Under the Advanced tab, I'm going to make sure everything is set to default. At the moment, I'm not sure I'm going to use a motion blur or not, but I'm going to keep my shutter angle to 180 and shutter phase to -90, the default, and the rest is okay. I'm not going to use a 3D renderer, but actually, hold on, I might use a camera though. So when it comes to 3D renderer, you got to be careful. If I use a classic 3D, it's very slow, but does have some benefits. If I use a Cinema 4D version, I might lose some of the options, such as blending mode, which I'm going to use, or track mattes, or layer styles. So I'm going to leave it to the classic 3D. However, under the option, I'm going to leave my the shadow map to the composition size, and everything should be okay. All right. So this is going to be my main composition. I want to start creating the earth. To create an earth, I would need a new composition. So, by the way, this composition one, I will call this thing solar system, for example. I will make a new composition just to create earth. For creating earth, I'm going to make like a circle for the earth. And this circle will be kind of nicer if I just make it into a square rather than make it a widescreen, because if I make it 1080, for example, by 1080, which is unorthodox, but it works. If I leave it to 1080 by 1080, probably works better for me. And I'm going to call this composition earth. I apply, and this is what I have. I'm going to turn my transparency on so you guys can see this layer by default is transparent due to fact I'm going to create multiple layers, and some of these layers they will be a solid layer. So I'm going to right click down here somewhere and create a new solid. Now when it comes to color, be honest with you, I'm going to go with something like a red for now, make it a little bit easier, but I'm going to leave everything else as is. I'm going to call this thing probably not the background, but I'm going to call this thing a lower layer is fine, just kind of lower. Now once I got the lower done, I'm going to effects and presets, and I'm going to search for stroke. Now this stroke is under generate, and if I grab the stroke filter and I drag it over this layer, a stroke by default doesn't do anything. Look at it, there's nothing there because it needs something called a path, just like Illustrator. I mean, in Illustrator, when you guys applying a stroke to something, what do you guys do? You need to make a shape in order to apply or change the value of the stroke, right? In Adobe After Effects, a stroke by default applies but doesn't give you any edge because I don't have any shape yet. So the kind of path it needs, it cannot be a shape, but it needs a mask. So I'm just going to show you guys how this thing works. If I go to, for example, a star, by the way, you must select the layer. Otherwise, if you don't select the layer, you're creating a shape layer. I don't want a shape layer. It needs to be a mask. So here, if I make a mask, I better change the mask color to something else. And if I turn my transparency off, you guys can see that's the mask, the edge. As you can see, my path, my stroke is supposed to be a white color. I don't see a white color around it. I don't see anything. Right there is nothing. But the moment I'll go to my stroke panel, mask one appears. When I select it, I see the stroke now. If I magnify it, you guys can see it. Right there. I can adjust the stroke size. I can adjust the brush hardness. I can make the stroke really sharp or really soft. This is a soft stroke. And this is, of course, the sharp one. Now, of course, in Illustrator, we don't have that. Unless you use some sort of tricks to make the stroke appear to be softer or smoother, like a gradually degrade the color with some techniques. Opacity. Obviously, if I had my opacity on, you guys can tell that I'm actually adjusting the opacity of the stroke only. Now, what is interesting about the stroke, what I showed you, is not about making the stroke itself. Is the fact that you have an option called the start and the end. Right now, my end is at 100. If I put it to 0, it's gone. But this is the starting point. You guys see the start? right there. Many times the students ask me, I have a picture of, for example, a map of a country, or a map of an office, or a blueprint, a layout or something. I want to create a border around it, but I want the border to kind of follow. And then some students, they try to create this effect by using a write-on filter, which I usually teach to students in a very basic level of Adobe After Effects. Write-on is a great thing, but write-on is a brush. So if you want something to be very precise, and you don't want to go through the hassle of creating all the sorts of keyframes for it, you can use this. The only downside with this trick, of course, is you need to have a mask. But again, mask can be designed with the pen tool, right? So if I just basically trash this mask and go with a pen tool and literally create any shape I want, I don't know what I'm drawing here, I'm just drawing something basic, and I select the mask again, and here it is. It doesn't matter what the shape look like, it will go around it. Obviously, you guys can create the end and a start. For example, I can make the starts from this point. It doesn't have to be from the beginning point, because you're going to say, okay, I designed my shape in a wrong way, but I want to start from here to go there. Not a problem. Your start is at 30%, and the end is the same number. I'll go with the 31 and 31. Guess what? If I go to timeline, I create a keyframe for it, and I go somewhere else and I change this value to 60%. Now I have an animation that goes from this point to the 60% that I decided to go. So you're not always stuck at the beginning to the end of it. So since we have some ideas about what the stroke does and how we can take advantage of it, obviously I need to create a better mask. So I'm going to delete this mask, and I would create a mask with the ellipse tool. Something look like this. I'm holding a shift key here to keep it a perfect circle, and I am doing my best to keep it in the center, and done. Obviously I can use the option called grade and guide, and by looking at the grade and guide, you can tell that my mask is not exactly centered. Some of you may think about the align. Align also works too. As you can see, I use the align, but because my mask is selected though, if I select the layer, then the layer is always perfectly in the center because I never really moved it. As you can see, my transform and the point is exactly at the center, so didn't really move those things. So it looks okay on the middle of a composition. Now it's time for me to create actual the stroke for it. I'm going to call I'm going to rename the mask one to something like, for example, Earth Edge. And then when it comes to the stroke itself, I will use, it's funny, this layer that I made, it's a red color. So I'm actually going to layer solid settings. What I want to have a red stroke. So, sorry, my solid settings right here. I'm just going to change the layer color to something else. There, this blue is fine. Now I'm going to select my mask from the filter. When it comes to the size of a brush, I'm going to go with something a little bit larger, something like, 20 something. Just going to make sure everything looks good. And on original image, I'll select on transparency. That should be all right. On transparency, funny is I don't see my stroke at all. It's kind of funny. So let me get rid of the stroke and apply it again. Sometimes when you're deleting something, oh yeah, also you start at 0, finishing at the end. There we go. I can see the stroke now. Was strange though. When it comes to the size of a stroke, I think 20 looks good. I'm gonna leave it like this. And when it comes to the brush softness, I can make the edge of a brush a little bit softer, around the 40%. And definitely the end is 100. And the start is at 0. And I want to get rid of the solid color I had, the blue one. So I'm going to use on transparent. This will create it on transparency. Also, the color I want it red. There we go. That looks decent. I'm just going to turn this thing off, by the way. Looks not too bad. The next step, what I'm going to do, I need to add, which is a tricky part of this lesson file, is, you remember when I said about I'm going to create a solar radiation, something like a wave, like this coming through the sun. This solar radiation will have some sort of very difficult to see with this color I choose for some reason. Let me choose a different color here, like a darker blue. This solar radiation will have some sort of particles inside, like a waves that passing through the top and the bottom. It actually moves through it as like a little thing. It's difficult to explain it. It's more like a radio wave, like a high heavy particles, like a gamma radiation or something. But I want this Earth to have that radiation pass through it. So I'm going to create something. Let me collapse this layer. I need a new solid layer. I will call this thing radiation. Again, I'm going to change the color of this solid to something else, so make it easier for you guys to see it. Again, the color of the solid itself doesn't matter. I can change that, but what I need to do is I'm going to use a filter called fill. Now, let's talk about a filter called fill. Fill, again, is under generate. And if I grab a fill filter and apply it to this layer, the layer disappears. Why? Because fill itself, again, need a mask. You need to have a mask for it. And obviously, you can adjust the color of it, and you can just do some little tricks with this fill. So when it comes to fill, I want to make sure the other layer is visible. I'm going to create a mask, but this mask doesn't have to be like a circle. I'm just going to make it into a rectangular shape. Something like this will do. Now, I'm going to call this thing radiation fill. Remember, I'm renaming my mask as well. I always mention it to my students in the class. You should always keep an eye on a mask, and even give it a different color, because I just want to be able to see it and also understand what mask I'm selecting. Now, when I'm selecting the mask, I'm just going to change the color. Look, the color of the fill is red. The color of the layer is green. This, what you see, is not the solid color, is the fill color. If I turn the fill off, that's what it looked like. So the fill can override the color. The advantage of fill, of course, is the feather. You have a horizontal feather and you have a vertical feather that you can apply to the fill. You can also invert it. I'm going to change the color of the fill to lighter red, something a little bit lighter. Then the advantage of this thing is this little icon inside your Adobe After Effects layer panel called adjustment layer. If I select that adjustment layer, this is what happens. Gotta make sure everything looks good. This is good. I don't want to invert. Now the mask is actually inside. I can select all masks or just basically the mask I have. And the adjustment layer will let the pass through it because I convert this layer into adjustment layer. I can also use this option called the transparency. Now I prefer the transparency because this is called preserve transparency. Let me show you what it exactly does. If I change the color here, look at the result. Do you see it? Right there. If I turn the transparency off, of course you know the mask look like that edge. But now I can only apply to whatever I want. The good news is I can animate this thing. You guys probably getting the idea what I'm going to do. This mask can be moved, right? I shouldn't have done that. Selecting a whole mask like this can be moved like this. You see that sort of radiation I was talking about? That's the idea I have. So I'm going to start with putting on the left side somewhere like this. And that records a bit of a keyframing and animation. So shouldn't be a big deal for me to create an animation. I'm going to start with position. So I'm just going to press P on my keyboard and enable the position. I'm going to go 10 frames forward. That's probably easy for me to do. Then I'm going to move this rectangular shape to the other side of the screen. I got to make sure I'm selecting by double clicking on the edge of a mask because I need to move the whole mask at one piece. Also, I'm holding the shift key when I'm doing this thing, so the mask will go horizontal. Doesn't matter you hold the shift or not because it just moves from left to right side. Unfortunately, for some reason, today things are not working well for me. Oh yeah, sorry, I have my caps lock on. That's what happened. Oh, I got another idea. Sorry, let me redo it again. This is, rather than moving the mask, I actually move the layer instead. If I can grab it, let me see. This should be okay. There. I'm not going to animate the mask because I got an idea that the problem is, look, I want to create a loopable animation like this, right? If I use the mask, then it will be a bit of a trouble because I need to create a loop. But I'm saying loop, I don't want this mask to go back and forth. It's not a pendulum. It needs to go one way, one direction, left to right, left to right, left to right, like a radiation coming from the sun. So what I would do instead, I need, because look, if I go to frame, for example, frame 15 or 16, if I copy paste these two keyframes, then this would happen. It goes forward and it comes back again. That's not what I want to do because it's not a one-way street. So I'm going to select the last keyframe and I'm going to right click on it, select toggle hold keyframe. When I select toggle hold keyframe, it's going to hold the keyframe. It's not going to move it back and forth. So I can go, let's say 5 frames forward, and then I copy paste these two guys. Look what happens in between. It doesn't come back. Right there. So it goes from left to right, left to right. I go to the last keyframe by pressing J. I better do this thing actually, expanding my transform a little bit easier for me to select the keyframes because I usually do marquee. I hit the page down 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I copy paste it. I go to the end somewhere here, press J, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I select these keyframes, copy paste it. Now one more copy paste, I should be all right. J, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Copy paste, and here it is. That should be all right. Look. That's all right. That looks actually very good. Of course, the color, I choose a certain color, so is much stronger, but I definitely can change this color to a lighter red because I need to build it gradually to create that glowing effect, right? So I'll go with a lighter red like this. I know it's a little bit difficult to see it at first when it's animating. And then the edge. The edge of a fill, I'm supposed to be able to adjust it with a vertical and horizontal feather. And it actually does a very decent job. Let me see it. Again, is nice to use a different color. So when I'm looking at it, and as you can see, the feather works really well. But I don't like something at the edge of it though. This is some really weird thing. You guys see the green through it? Yeah. See? The green shows. Because when it feathers the fill, feathers it to what? Feathers it to the solid layer. Unless I gotta go make the solid red, then it's not gonna work. Because this, whatever color I'm choosing here for the fill, is need to feather to itself. So constantly, I can't just go there to the layer solid settings and try to change that color to match it to this color. It's a very counterintuitive. So there's another option. I'm going to put the fill feather to 0, very sharp edge. Then I'm going to use simply a blur filter. That's right. Some simple filters such as, I think, effect, blur and sharpen, fast box blur should do the job. Why? It works really well because, as you can see, it has a horizontal and vertical, so I just need it horizontally and just grab the blur, and let's see there. Notice that there's no green. Yeah, there's no green. So what I want to show you guys today in here is the tricks in Adobe After Effects. It seems obvious, but sometimes you have to go around the block. The idea in here is I want to create a feather. If I don't use a blur filter and use an option called the horizontal feather, this will feather it to the background, which is the solid layer, so it shows as a green. But if I put the same thing to 0 and I apply a blur filter to it, it does a job. That looks good. Now I can go back to fill and change it to whatever color I want, and it blends it to itself, not to the green as a background. So I don't have to worry about my solid color, whatever color it is. As I said, I'm going to go with a lighter red, so it looks like this. I'm not sure how well you guys can see this thing when I'm playing it, but I can see some sort of red radiation passing through it. Obviously, I need another radiation level. So in this case, I need to create another layer. So I'll go by right-clicking, select New Solid. Again, I'll make my solid color something different. Maybe I change it into a purple or pink. Okay. And then I'll make the default mask. But this mask, I'm gonna go to the very beginning because I need to see the other one. Yeah. I'm gonna make this mask smaller, like the same height but narrower. How much narrow? Narrower than the other one for sure, because the other one it's a lot wider. So I'm gonna grab this mask, as you guys can see, and I'll move the mask. Sorry, I tried to select the selection tool. I'll move the mask a little bit to the left. I'll push it outside to where the other one is. Yeah, that looks good. Now, obviously, what I would do is if I can copy paste all the keyframes I just did here. But what happens if I change my mind, or I want to adjust the speed of this radiation by time remapping it or do something else to it? For example, we create a solar panel or a solar panel, sorry, solar system, and somebody says, yeah, can you put the sun the other side? Well, then the rays has to move from right to left, not the left to right. So these things I can kind of go to the stretch, and I can go type -100, and I can flip the keyframe or reverse the motion or reverse the keyframe. You can do that by reversing a time. So that is doable. Time reverse, if I can select the layer, I can do a time reverse if I have to. So this, see it? Goes the other way. Not a problem, just a one shortcut. But what happens if I have a multiple layers? They're supposed to follow each other. Then I have to apply to the other one, to the other one. So I would use the option called the parenting. I'll grab a pick whip and make this layer on top child of the radiation. If I do that, they move together. Look. There you go. Now, of course, the placement of it is important, because when you're creating, I'm just going to call this thing, what was the name was supposed to use? That's radiation. You know what? I'm going to call this layer, sorry, bad habit of Photoshop, uh, inner radiation, because is a inside of it. When I'm looking at the inner radiation right in the middle, they're not exactly at the middle. So what I can do is I can double click on the mask, and I should be able to move the mask right in the center of it, because the whole idea between parent and a child is I can move the child anywhere I want, and it would not affect the parent. For example, if I create two shapes, I'm going to create a star. Remember, that's a shape layer. So shape comes with a stroke and everything else, just like Illustrator. And I'm going to create another shape, ellipse, but I need to be a different layer. In Adobe After Effects, you should be able to create multiple shapes inside of one layer. But if I deselect the layer, I'm making a different shape. And this has a different fill. These two shapes are independent. I want to make a star parent of the circle. So I grab the circle shape too, and I use a pick whip, and I drag it over the star name. So what happened right now is the circle is a child, and the star is a parent. You see what happened when I'm moving the parent? When I move the parent, the child moves. When I move the child, the parent won't move. Just imagine you holding a baby in your hand and your arms as you're moving around. Baby in your arms has no choice, has to move with you. But the baby also can move himself or herself in there. If I grab the baby or a child and I scale it, no problem. But if I scale the parent, child has no choice. So that's what I use the child and a parent in here to make it a lot easier. The filter also I need is the fill. If you remember, I need a fill, so I drag it over it. Don't drag it over this thing. Can be very difficult because you don't know which one you're dragging it over it. This one definitely going to be much brighter. And also, I'm just going to leave the mask one as is. And remember, if I select the transparency, it goes inside, right? As usual, I'm going to apply a filter, a blur filter. I already have one here, so I'm going to copy it. I'm just going to paste it right there. So this is what I have so far. Not bad. There. I don't know how well you guys can see this thing, but on my screen, when I played it at 24 frames per second, it actually looks pretty decent. The little red I made earlier, or a pink or rosé color behind it, it gives it a very nice little effect that looks pretty good. I'm happy. What I would do is now I need this thing to have a glowing effect. Now that's the tricky thing about glow. I'm going to create a new solid right there. I'm going to make this solid dark, like black color, and I will call this thing glow. When it comes to glow, I'll go to my effects and preset and search for glow. I have a multiple glow options in Adobe After Effects, but the one I'm looking for is under a stylize. I drag it over, he applies the glow. Of course, glow by default won't look like anything because I need to make sure the glow passes through a layer. For example, if I create a shape or a mask in there, you're gonna say, well, you applied glow, so where's the glow? Glow is supposed to be white and doesn't really show anything. But if I apply it as a transparency layer, notice that here when I turn it into an adjustment layer, the glow is passing through. Now I'm not sure how well you guys can see this thing, but the glow is actually applying it right there. I'm going to start by changing some of the options. Do I want to use alpha channel? No. If I use alpha channel, the glow applies to the edge. This may not look very good unless you guys like this particular glow. I'm going to leave it to, oops, I'm going to leave it to the color channel. There. That's what a glow look like. Without it, with the glow. The next step, I'm going to adjust the glow radius by making the radius much larger, something like 18 or 20. The intensity has to be a little bit higher too. So I'm going to go to about maybe 3, okay? I'm going to keep the glow behind because I keep the glow on top, behind, or option none is not what I want. I'll leave the glow behind it. And I have a channel of adding, multiplying, subtracting. Of course, you know by default in Photoshop, glow is set to screen, right? I'm going to leave it to the add because add give it a little bit more brightness in a way. The glow has a multiple shade of a color. Color goes from one color to another color. As you can see in here, you have a color A and color B. Now, in Photoshop, we don't have that option. So you can have a glow goes from one color to another color. In here, I'm just going to use the option original colors. Notice that the difference? If I select the A and B color, I can select glow goes from, for example, white to green there. And I can make the white, for example, goes to yellow, goes to green. So this is actually kind of neat effect because you guys can create a color radiation. Some of you remember movie The Matrix when the screen, you know, that all the text, the green text on a monitor, the old TV, it was kind of like it had a glowing effect on it. That's one of the tricks you can do to create a glow. It's very, very powerful, this glow filter. But in this case, I don't want to reinvent the colors because what happens if I change my mind and I go back to, for example, fill of the other colors and I change the fill? Then I'm really have to go and rematch the colors. So I'm going to change it to original color. And regardless of what I'm using, that will be applied. I'm going to leave the color selection of color looping to the A, B, and A is fine. It doesn't matter in here which one I'm selecting because I'm not using A, B color. So you can leave it as a default. And again, the color degree, whatever, it makes no difference here. So I'm just going to leave it to the 0 degree, whatever it is. And the amount 50% makes no difference. To me, the glow direction, horizontal, vertical. Let me see. Horizontally doesn't look very good. Vertically looks better. I'm going to leave it to horizontal and vertical. There you go. Let's take a look. I might make my glowing radius a little bit larger. That actually looks much better. That's the radius for it right there. And the glow intensity, I might increase a little bit. And then the glow threshold. Remember, threshold, you gotta just, if I go really low threshold or a high threshold, actually looks nicer. Or this thing. Again, that's just up to you what you like. I like this glowing effect around it. Maybe I'll reduce this thing a little bit, just a little bit. Let me see. Yeah, I'll leave it around 90% to give it a little bit of glow on the yellow. This one is just too feathered. Yeah, that looks okay. There we go. I haven't saved my project yet. Good Lord. Better do that before I crash something. So I'm just gonna go to my desktop. Where's my desktop? Desktop. Eloquo Online. After Effects Advanced Composition. I'm just gonna call this thing my solar system. There. Now I'm gonna go and create the moon. The moon is a lot easier in contrast because I'm not gonna create any kind of radiation passing through it. So I'm gonna go to composition, new composition. I'm gonna leave everything as is and just call this thing moon. And to be honest with you, I need a new solid as usual, and I will change the solid color to, again, something easy to see. I will call this thing moon base. I will start by creating a mask. Make sure the layer is selected. I'll hold the shift key. And again, I try to do my best to put in the center or let it go using the align, and I center it. You probably noticed that my panels are very minimalistic when I work with After Effects because all I need is effects and presets, and I need a panel preview to enable and disable few options. and then I need the info and alignment, literally. I don't need any other panels when I create a lot of stuff. I mean, if I need one, I will go get one. That's why these panels, I cannot work without align or info, effects and preset. They just make it a lot easier. I don't have to remember where the filter was, and I have to go through the list of the stuff all the time. So as long as you know what filter you need, you can just type it in. Make it a lot easier. As far as a moon goes, this part of a moon, I need to use the default stroke. So I'm gonna again type a stroke, or I go under the effects, generate a stroke. I'll select the mask 1 for it, and I'll increase the value of the stroke. I think that looks kind of decent, except I need the moon to be kind of grayish, not white, like a kind of like a dark gray, something like this. Be honest with you, I don't have to touch anything else, except I need it to be on transparent, right? I don't want to look what happened if I leave it to the, that's what the mask does, right? So leave it like this. This is actually not too bad. I would like to make it a little bit thicker though. And you know what? This is too big. This is too big. This mask is too big. Because I need to apply glowing, and if I create glowing, it might crop it. So I'm going to double click on the edge of a mask. I'm going to hold the shift key to make a mask smaller, something like this. Then I center it again. I can kind of reduce the amount of brush size. There we go. That's better. Now, some of you are probably wondering where my anchor point. I'm not going to spin it, so if my anchor point is off in the center, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in a specific spot. Makes no difference. So I'm going to leave it as is. Now, for the moon, I don't need any kind of animation because the moon gonna point towards the sun, so I will have a white glowing effect around the edge of it. So that should be enough for me. I need to create an edge for it. So I need to duplicate this layer. That's probably the easiest thing for me to do. So I'm going to select the layer, and I use a Control D or Command D to duplicate it. I will call this thing moon. I'll call it half moon. When it comes to the half moon, I'm going to expand the half moon, expand the effects. Actually, I can do it here. I will make the gray slightly brighter. But I don't want the whole moon to become like this. So I will adjust the end point to 50%. I type 50 exactly. There we go. You guys can see how powerful this filter stroke is actually. The rest of it should be easily done with the next filter called the glow. Obviously, I'm going to use the same filter as a glow we done before. So I need to right click, new, solid. I will call this thing glow. Glow is under effect stylize, and it's, where did it go? Nah, it's easier to just search for it. There you go. Obviously, I need to see through it. So we're going to talk about the adjustment layer. In Photoshop, when you guys create an adjustment layer, Adjustment layer in Photoshop, they are in a way restricted by the number of the options you have. For example, you have option in Photoshop with levels, curves, HSP, uh, you name it, photo filters, whatever. There's a bunch of them. I don't really remember all of them, invert and so on. What the presets for it is in Adobe After Effects is very different. First of all, in Adobe After Effects, you can create an adjustment layer directly, no problem. If you create an adjustment layer literally is a white layer, see it? It's a white solid with the adjustment layer icon enabled. So don't think that adjustment layer, look, adjustment layer has a solid settings. How's that possible? Because it is a solid layer. So you don't really need to make an adjustment layer. Any layer in Adobe After Effects can be turned into adjustment layer. By default, adjustment layers are invisible. I know I'm just using a glow effect here. Let me forget the glow. Let me go to something else. Let me go to the effect and apply generate beam. As you can see, I can apply a beam to that layer. This layer is adjustment layer, but some filters such as beam, for example, they have an option that says composite on original. If I enable it, composite on original, and if the layer is adjustment layer is transparent, it passes through it. If I turn it off, that's what you see. You see the beam on the original solid. If I turn this off, then the beam allows to pass through it. Some filters such as glow, for example, doesn't have that option. There is no composite on original or pass through it or show me as a transparency. So if you want to create something like this, this has to be a transparent layer. There's no way around it. Now about the glow itself. I'm going to change the settings. For example, glow radius, a little bit, I'm going to leave the threshold alone. Radius definitely has to be larger, about 20. The intensity, I'm going to put it to 3 or 4. I think that's what we had last time. I'm going to leave everything as is. AB colors or original colors. But I don't see much of a glow here though. Strange. I should see a lot of glow. Oh yeah, well, because my filter was off. Sorry about that. There you go. Now I can start fine-tuning it. Should I go with the AB color? No, that doesn't look good. What about if I go from white to white? Increase the glow, increase the radius. Oh, that's just too much, eh? Yeah, I'll leave the threshold like this. Let me go from AB to original color. Let's see which one looks better. I think original color looks better. Yep. Yeah, I want to create something like this. That looks decent. One other thing I want to do is the inner one. Remember the second one I made? I duplicate the layer. It would be nice if I actually make the stroke smaller, right? Like a thinner, like this. See? If I turn the glow off, right there. See, I'll make a line. a bit smaller. I'm not sure how much, but I will make it almost half the size. Then the glow will be a little bit more refined. I don't have to push the glow really high. There. No, I need to make it smaller again. A little bit. The stroke has to be slightly smaller. This need to be, you gotta do a push and pull here a couple of times to be able to get the whole thing line up properly. Yeah. Yeah, definitely a smaller brush size. A smaller brush size will work. There we go. There we go. Do you see the white in there now? That's what I want to create. I want to see the edge of the white, but I want to see a decent glow. So as I'm making a glow nice and glowy, I want this middle line to be a little bit thinner to be more visible. So I'll go back again to the other layer and reduce the brush size of the stroke size until it looks slightly smaller. And I think that's good enough. Yep, that's good. That's all I need. I'm going to save my project. And good to go. So we made the Earth, and we made the Moon. Now, one of the trickiest thing I'm going to create is the solar radiation itself. The solar radiation is a tricky one because, as I said, there's a couple of things involved in there. First of all, I need a wave like this, and this wave will move, of course. And while the wave is moving, there will be a second highlighter. Remember how the Earth was? That was a line will passing through it. You will see a similar glowing moving through the wave. So this will take a while to do. I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. I need a new composition. Now this composition going to be a tricky one because the solar radiation need to be a very, very long one. So I would think my composition numbers will be very, very tricky. So I'm going to create a new composition. Call this thing light wave. The width, I'm going to go with the 3000 pixels. I'm guessing, by the way, it's not a written in stone. You guys can go lower and higher. I just want, remember, the screen that I'm using is 1920 1080, right? I want an array to be able to fit in there. And because I'm going to create a radiation that on my final screen, there will be, or maybe I should use the other one. There will be a sun here and the rays will go like this. Okay? A lot of them, which is a copy paste, right? So if you think about it, if I have a screen here, something like this size, it is 1920 by 1080. I don't care about the 1920, but just imagine if the sun is on top right here, one of the rays going from this point all the way to down here. I just want to make sure it fits. So if I go with the 2000 pixels, it's not going to fit. 1920 definitely not going to fit. So I'm thinking about 3000, maybe 4000, something like that. That's what I'm choosing that number. So this number 3000 is not a something I just guess it. I knew something I need larger than a 2000. I don't want to risk it. And the height of it, I don't need the line to be very thick. So I'm going to go with something like 100 pixels. And I'm just going to okay it. Very, long line. Now, a couple of things I need to do. For example, I need to go to enable my action and title save. The reason I need that, because I need that cross line in the middle. I don't care about the, I know this is a really funny one, isn't it? When you look at it, the action and title save. I don't really care about the action and title save. I need this to be able to see where the center of it is. I will create a new solid, and I'll call this thing base. Obviously, the base wave would have been red, would be nicer. So I'm just going to skip the part and using the filters. I'm just going to go and make the solid itself red, like a darker red, something like that for a base. Yeah, it looks good, I guess. Because I want to save some time. I need to make a mask. And there's a tricky thing about the mask here. I need a small mask. So this is a very long one. It's 3,000 pixels. I'm not going to make a mask here. I'm going to zoom out the best I can and creating a mask past the point. I'll make it a small though, something like this. I need way smaller, by the way. I'll make my mask color into a yellow color, my default favorite color for a mask. Then I zoom into it. I need to center the mask. So making sure the mask is selected and the mask is centered. It is actually centered, isn't it? Surprisingly, can't even believe it. But don't worry about it. What I need to do now with the mask is I double click on the edge of the mask. Oh, it's not perfectly centered, is it? Oh, it doesn't matter. I can manually center it here. I need to bring this thing down to the center. How much? A very small line. Something like this. It's difficult to see it though. It's very, very small. Size of a couple of pixels. Not more than that. Can select this mask and again, if I want to move the mask up, I'll double click on it and move it up a little bit. Maybe make it slightly wider. Slightly. By the way, this controls the wave itself. So if you don't really like the wave, you think wave is too thick, you can adjust it with this thing. I'm not going to use a stroke for it. You're probably saying, why don't you use a stroke? Not going to work with a stroke. You will see later. Now, the next step, which is a tricky one, is the one I need to create the highlights to pass through it. I'm going to lock this layer because I don't want to touch anything accidentally. I will go and make a shape. That's right. I'm making a shape layer because shape has few cool features that I need. I'm guessing the size of it. So first of all, I don't need a stroke. And my shape, I'll try to center it the best I can again. It's all right. I just need to make sure is the height is taller. This has to be taller. Yeah. And the anchor point, I try to keep it in the center of it. Funny the way things look So make a shape again from here. This time, because I have no stroke, it's easier for me to draw it. There. I try to make it the same size of that line here, so I'm going to keep track of it. That looks good, right in the center. Perfect. So why I'm making a shape like this, and why should I care about the shape like this? Well, there are a couple of features that when you are using a shape like a rectangle, when I expand it, as you notice that the shape itself has a stroke and has a fill. If I expand the stroke, which I turned it off by the way, I can set, this is like Adobe Illustrator, isn't it? No, you guys remember Illustrator, butt cap, round cap, projecting cap? Just like this. And the stroke width, everything, I can just leave it as is. I'll go to the fill, and this fill, you saw it earlier, it is a filter that you can apply to a mask, or you can use a fill as a shape. I'm going to change this thing to what I need a same red I had, a little bit brighter. So I'm going to use an eyedropper and select the same red as the solid color. Then I change the red into an orange version of it, slightly. There's a little trick. So I'm going to keep the brightness the same way, but I'm shifting the color. Here, something like this. Maybe a little bit sideways. This way is okay. The next step for me is I want to see this shape through the line I made. So I make it into a transparent layer. Look what happened when I made it into a transparent layer. So what is this transparent layer? In Photoshop, we have that called preserve transparency. Some of you do remember Photoshop, that you have a layer and then you want to paint with something, but you don't want to mess up the painting. You enable that option, preserve transparency option in Photoshop, and you only paint on that area. That's exactly what it is. Look, when I enable this transparency option, it only apply that shape pass through a transparent layer, which is the line. That's what the result is. For me, sure, I could have made a shape look like this. Remember the small one I made earlier with the base layer? What would happen later that you and I decided the base layer is too thick or too thin? Well, look, I can make this thing thick or thin, and the other one correspond with it. If I create a shape the same size and somehow magically fit it, which is not a big deal, the problem is if I change my mind, I don't want to burn the bridges. That's why I'm creating it this way. So if you have a client or yourself, you're not sure about it, you can adjust it. Now there's another reason for it too. There's an option in front of the shape layer called a contents. And if you look very carefully, there's a little option called add. When I click on add, there's a little triangle in front of it. Is a list of options up here. There's one option called repeater. Now, what is this repeater business? Let me show you this thing first because it makes perfect sense. I'm going to create a little circle here as a shape. Let's just say I want to have 20 of these things. So what are you going to do? You're going to put 20 in the sides? No. You go to the add, you select repeater, and then you expand the repeater. You type 20. And voila. If I change the original shape in any way, the virtual shapes will change. Of course, repeater has other options that I'm able to play with. For example, it's called offset, that I can shift it to the left or right. For example, if I put the repeater in the middle, remember, I have only one shape. Those are all virtual shapes that After Effects makes. If I go to transform, then a repeater has an option for the transform that can create an offset with an anchor point. I can have a position stretched. Maybe I should put my anchor points back to 0 and 0. There you go. I can scale, and the scale is interesting one. Look, if I make them smaller, you guys can tell that how the scale look like. So you can create it three-dimensional. Repeater is a very, very powerful feature in Adobe After Effects. So repeater is a part of a shape. That's why I'm making a shape here. I could have made a mask or anything else, but I need the repeater option. So I'll go to the add, select repeater. The moment I add the repeater, look what happens. I have 3 of them by default. I'm going to expand the repeater. And I'm going to also expand the transform. Looking at the repeater position, I can push them closer, or I can push them forward. Remember, that's the X position, right? I want the repeater to be a little bit more far away. More like I'm creating a dashed line in Illustrator, right? I'm not really sure what number I want because I don't, if I go to the info, again, when I'm selecting this shape, I don't have exactly the number of the size of it. If I have to go to the actual rectangular path, the size is 72.8. So if that's a size 72.8, then I will, well, you know what? I was kind of right. You doubling it for a position. I got a 144. What a coincidence. Wow. That is actually pretty good. I'm happy with the result. I'm going to leave it as is. And then when it comes to the number of the repeats, well, that's kind of big deal. I need to make the repeats very, very large. So I'm going to type 200 copies. Remember, this wave going to go through it, right? The problem with 200 copies, it goes 200 copies to the right side. What I need to do, I need to pull it back to the left side. So there's an option called offset. I better zoom in, and you guys can see what the offset does. Come on. It's gonna pull it backwards as I go to the negative, right there. -8? No, I need way more than that. So I'm gonna type like a -160. That looks good. I have a lot of it. Now I should be able to easily animate this thing by making sure the actual repeater moves. I can use very much any keyframe I want here, but I would not risk it because if I change my mind about the number of the copies of a repeater or offset, remember you can animate the offset and repeater if you wanted to. I'd rather not to. I don't want to take a risk. So I would basically expand my transform under the shape. And this thing, I'm going to call this thing, by the way, the layer shape layer 1. I'm just going to call this thing inner wave. Actually, sorry, that's an outer wave because I will put an inner wave in there later. So I'm just going to call it outer wave. For me, the best way to animate it is using a position property. I'm going to just move the position of a shape. Remember, if I move the shape, the repeater are virtual objects, right? So they should literally work together, and that makes it very easy. So I'll go to the end of a timeline. By the way, I'm guessing. And what I would do is I'll grab this guy, the shape, position, and move it. I'm holding a shift key, by the way, to keep it horizontal. How much? I don't know. That much? Maybe? Oh, good. My repeaters are still there. So if I play it, it looks like this. You see? I'm just going to keep an eye on the screen. I'm going to make my screen full screen here. I try to deselect everything I can and turn the guide layer and everything off. I'm going to play it from the beginning, hit the home key and play it. I just want to make sure the number of the offset that I used and the number of the repeaters that I use are matching, and I'm not going to end up with a garbage one or something missing. Looks good. That was a 10 seconds, I believe. 3, 4, 5, 6. I just want to, because mine is a loop, I don't want to see any kind of jumping in there. That's good. That's very good. No problem. By the way, if you want to adjust the speed of it, again, this is, I just turned it into a very basic animation. Just grab this guy and push it to the right. On the position wise, you see my position is a 5,120. If I put it to 7,000, 6,000, it goes faster. If I reduce a number, make it slower. So that's why I'm controlling the speed of the solar radiation. That looks good. I'm gonna take a 15 minutes break. After when I'm coming back, I'm gonna put a second layer of solar radiation on top of it and creating a glowing effect. Then we're gonna create it into a wave, and that's gonna be a nice, interesting one, because creating the wave is just a wave filter that we use in Photoshop, and because it moves, we have to animate the wave. Because I'm animating the texture. If I apply a wave, the wave is not moving. I'll make a new shape right in the middle. I need a bit of a highlighter in the center of it. So I'm just going to make sure nothing is selected. I would probably lock everything. And I will make a new rectangle. The height of it doesn't really matter, but the width is, I'm just going to keep it something like this. I think that looks good. Yeah, I think it looks good. Obviously, the color for this particular fill, I will expand it and I'll make it a lighter version of this color. So I use eyedropper because I don't remember the color. I select that color, then I make it a lighter version of that. Something like that. Obviously, I need to make sure pass through. So I'm gonna enable the transparency icon as right in the middle. Another option I have to make it nice and soft, I will apply a fast blow filter. By the way, I haven't applied a fast blow filter to the other one. I just wanted to make sure they work first of all. So I will also animate this thing. But in order to animate it, I got a better idea. First of all, I need to use a repeater. So repeater, as you can see, the repeater doesn't line up. So I try to keep it at the center the best I can. So what's going to happen is if I literally grab the information from the other repeater, I should be able to match them up. How should I do that? I'm going to use a script in After Effects. Because look, if I change my mind about the repeater settings, this repeater, if I change the value of the repeater settings or transformation or whatever, then I have to do it twice because these are filters. It cannot be kind of like a parented. So I'm going to use this option in After Effects called, I need to find the number of the copies. So I hold Alt key and I click on a stopwatch. I'm going to expression mode. I grab a pick whip and I connect it to the copies of the outer wave. Now, the moment I let go, as you can see, I have way more tiny dots in there. A lot more. Because whatever number is this guy, this will always follow it. So if I change the larger rectangle or reduce the number or change the speed, the other one will always follow it. The offset value, I'm going to repeat the same thing. I'm going to hold the Alt key, click a stopwatch, grab a pick whip, and link the offset value. Now, the offset value is going the other way. The third thing I had to do, if you remember, was the position for the transform. So I select the position value and pick whip it to the position of the repeater transform. Doing so perfectly, it should be centered. Should be. Funny is, they're not. Strange. Well, maybe the position doesn't have to be linked. Maybe I need to adjust the position because position. Oh yeah, you know why? Position doesn't like the. No. Position not gonna work because if you remember, the position was a 144 was the doubling the size of a rectangle, the original rectangle. So what's my rectangle size? 8. It's not gonna work. So I need to do this thing manually. It's gonna be a bit tricky. Huh. That is not going to line up. What should I do this time? Oh yeah, the offset. The offset. The offset has to be off. Let me see if I move the offset. Make any difference? No. No, the offset is good. For some reason, they don't line up. They should line up because the position of this thing should be pushing it forward. They should line up. Very, very strange. Because I'm looking at everything looks correct and they should line up based on the values I have here. Let me reduce this thing. Let's see it, they line up here at 100%. But once I make it into 144, they don't line up. That is strange. You know what? I'm going to leave it to 100% because if you notice that everything is lined up, I think I got an idea. Because if I use a blur filter and I'm going to feather it, you probably won't see the edge anyway, right? I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to the effects, better select a layer, and this is, by the way, called an inner wave. Just don't want to make a mistake between them. I select the outer wave, go to the effects, blur, fast box blur. I don't care about the vertical one. but definitely this need to be adjusted. There we go. And also I can do this thing. I can make the shape narrower, right? Like literally I can make the shape smaller. There. Let me see it. Looks better. I will literally copy this filter, paste it on top of the inner one. There we go. Actually looks pretty good. Except the inner one doesn't move. You know what? I will do this. Press P, the position. Remember the position has the keyframe? I use a Alt click on a stopwatch of the inner one and I pick whip it to the position of the bottom one. Now they should follow each other. There we go. Done. So if I play it, it looks like this. Not bad. Not bad. I'm happy. I'm happy with the result. Now, of course, the whole point of this thing to make it into a wave. Well, let's make the wave then. Obviously, in order to make it wave, I need a new solid layer. I'll call this thing Mr. Wave. I'll most likely change this thing to something else so it's easier to see it. And I'm going to use a filter called a wave warp. Now, if I'm not mistaken, wave warp is under distort. Wave warp. This is what a wave warp does. When I play it, it moves. Wave warp is actually a Photoshop filter. So the good news about the wave warp is I can play with the settings, including the wave height. For example, wave height is a little bit too much at 10. I'll make it 9. And then the wavelength, I reduce that one to 35. And the direction, I leave it, the direction actually looks good. 90 degree, we're going from right to left, so that's perfect. The good news is I can adjust the wave speed. I can make it like at 2. The wave speed can go forward. The rest I'm going to leave it as is. Obviously, anti-aliasing, you can select it at high if you're making a production version of this thing. Now, if I use the transparency, look what happens. That's right, the adjustment layer. The adjustment layer let that wave warp, this wave warp, to pass through it. That's it. So when I play it, it looks like this now. Have you guys noticed there's two things happening? There's a one wave moving, and there is another wave, which is the color we made earlier with the repeater, moves inside of it. That's what I want to create as a solar radiation. Now, of course, I can increase the speed of the wave to, let's say, 3. If I go faster, may not look pretty good because now the wave goes faster than a lines inside the repeater. And what happened, it looks like a repeater going backwards. So you got to adjust the speed of it any way you like. I'll leave it to 2 because I don't want to make it too fast. I'm happy with the result at the moment. Everything is all right. I don't think I need to do anything else to it. That looks good. Now I made my elements. I made the planet Earth. I made the moon. I made a light wave. Now it's time for me to build the solar system. Building a solar system is a little bit tricky because there are a couple of other things I need to add. I'm gonna start by building the sun, and that is a tricky one. I would go to the project, create a new folder, call this thing composition folder. So I'll put all my compositions inside the composition folder. I have a solid layer that anytime you create a solid layer, After Effects place them in there. Even the adjustment layer one I made, I never really used it, is there. Just I don't need to delete that one. You guys can also use a select unused one. There's somewhere in there. I used to do it a long time ago. But if you search for it, you can just select unused one and get rid of those ones. I need to import a picture from, I think this is a one. No, sorry, that was from yesterday. There, I have a picture here called Starfield. This is a picture like this. You guys can create something like that in Photoshop easily if you have some time. But I have this thing, I just want to put it as a background picture, something like this. Now my screen definitely is smaller. This picture is a 4000 by 4000. So I should be able to move the star field to the side, something like this. And by the way, don't worry about this thing. This layer becomes a 3D layer. And then I can create some sort of depth of field in there with a camera. So this layer can be pushed back and it becomes a bit blurry. It looks like there's a distance happening there. So I can fix that one later. However, building a sun is a little bit trickier because I need to build multiple layers over each other to create that effect like the sun. So I start by creating a solid layer. I probably gonna go with some sort of orange color at first. I will call this thing sun. Then I'll make a mask, something like this. Probably my mask need to be slightly larger. Yeah. Now, if I want to make this thing look very good, I use a mask feather and I can feather it because I'm going to create a glowing effect for the sun. See it? And also I can use the mask expansion by pushing it inward or outward if you feel like the radiation is too much. So I can control that amount, something like this. I want to have a very nice glowing. I will need another mask. I will copy this mask, create a new solid called Sun2. I'll definitely change this thing to much brighter, more yellowish. And I paste the mask. Of course, because I copied this mask and when I paste it, it's the same mask. This mask has to be slightly smaller. But the problem is if I make the mask smaller, I might lose the radius. So I will double click on it and I move the mask here. Did I grab a wrong mask? Hope not. Yeah, lock this one. This mask, you know what? I'm going to make this mask a different color. So I'm just going to make sure I am selecting the right mask. This. And no, I don't want to move. I just want to move the mask. There we go. Do you guys see the orange? See it? Right there. Obviously, I reduced the amount of feather on this mask. And this layer is too bright for me. So I make it a bit more like this. As you can see, the layers are getting a little bit brighter. And also I'm going to reduce the feather. There. See? Right there. I'm going to copy the mask again. Lock the layers as I'm going. I'll create a new solid. And this one, I'm going to create sun core. I keep forgetting to change the color to brighter yellow. Paste my mask. For some reason, my mask doesn't look right. I don't know why my mask looked like this. Doesn't matter. I'm going to make a new one anyway. This mask has to be way smaller because I'm going to create the sun like this. And obviously, I'm going to change the color of a mask to something else. It's easier to see it. And then the feather for the core. There. That's what it looked like. Let me get rid of the star field in the back. See how it looked like? Creating something like this with a one layer is impossible because you need to build it gradually. This is a one layer. This is another layer. And this the other layer. All these three layers add to each other to create this effect. Obviously, I can use a layer blending too. For example, I can change this thing to, for example, soft light to blend it, or change it to overlay to create a little bit more harsher version, or put it to add to make it white brighter. If you try to make the edge of the sun really bright, you can select the lighten, or you can select just a normal the way I had it. Or you can turn it into a exclusion to create that, or the other one, subtract, to create something like a black hole. There. I'm happy. Now I'm going to create a solar rays. Because I create a light wave, I need to create a solar wave. The solar wave, I would recommend to create a new composition for it. So I'm going to create a new composition because I want to assemble everything here. This one, I'm going to go with a 1920 1080. Everything should be exactly the same thing. Let me see if I typed it properly. Yes. I'll color code this thing solar waves. I'm going to grab the composition I made earlier called the light wave and drag it in there. It's a good thing we made it longer, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this thing and I'll put it on the side. If you guys remember, I made the sun this area, right? Around that area. So my goal, let's take a look. See, the sun is, let's say, is here. So the rays will be down here somewhere. I can go to view and show rulers, and I can look at the numbers about 200, around 200 pixels. So when I go to this other composition, I can go and select show rulers, and I'm at about 200 right here. That's a 200. So I'm going to push it outside of the screen. Then I'm going to move the anchor point by pressing Y, a shortcut, and I place the anchor point right there. If I don't do this thing, rotating these things becomes very, very difficult. This part is literally straightforward because once I place it in the right spot, I don't need a ruler anymore. I can just rotate it like this. I'm going to create a limited number of these things because if I go too crazy, then my laptop will definitely choke. So I'm going to create a bunch of them only. I'm going to duplicate this one. And as I'm duplicating it, I rotate it. See? However, I would move it down a little bit. Then I can rotate it. You got to use a shortcut for these things. So just a little bit and then rotate. So the waves are closer here, far away on the other side. So again, I press V, I duplicate, I pull it down, then I use a W to rotate it. Literally, I'm going to do the same thing over and over. This, unfortunately, will take forever to do, but I'm just going to do a bunch of them so you guys will get the idea of how they look like when I assemble it. I'll duplicate again, and I move down, and I rotate. This will take a while, but if I play it, it looks like this. See it? Obviously, when I put this composition in here, probably under the sun, let's look like, see it? I need to fill the screen with these. So I'm talking about a couple of hundred layers. I'll show you guys the final one eventually. I will load the project with the final version of it so you guys can see what the final look like. And then Earth. Earth itself can be adjusted in the size. So I can just basically scale it. Originally supposed to be small, not very large. I mean, compared with the sun, right? So if I, for example, put the Earth here, as I play it, you guys can see the solar radiation pass through it to something look like that. And the moon, again, will be scaled down to a smaller than Earth for sure. Definitely smaller. To about maybe 4%. And here, something look like this. Of course, the moon will be rotating around the Earth, which this is a simple thing. I can just basically go here, grab a moon, press position, and then go to the end of a timeline and move the moon here, for example. And then I use this anchor point to just basically curve the path. Something like this. So the moon, as you can see, passing right behind it. I'm going to show you one more thing. For example, I want Earth to actually cast shadow. And once I've done that, I'll show you the final project, and you guys can see it's a bit more complicated than what I'm showing you. There's a lot more has to be done, but the core of it is there. You already seen how the solar radiation works, how the wave works, how the sun, all the little pieces. Putting it together is just a matter of reassemble and create a gigantic layers, because I need to have at least 100 layers here. And just imagine what this thing gonna look like at the back with 100 of those things. So about the Earth and the Moon shadow, I'm gonna go with the Earth shadow. I'm gonna create a new composition. Now this composition doesn't have to be very large. I'll make it into a 1080 by 1080. Actually, no, I needed wider. So the height, I changed the height into a much lower number. How about I change it into 400? Yeah, width 1000 is fine. I'll make it the width 1000. Yeah, that's good. Now, I want to create, just imagine if Earth casting a shadow on the solar rays. What do you think is going to happen? The solar rays, the shadow will be something look like this. And here will be a darker shadow. And as you go towards the end, becomes a lighter shadow and kind of disappears. So that's the idea. I'm going to call this composition shadow. I will have an Earth and a Moon shadow, but for now I'm just creating one of them only. I need a solid layer, and I gotta make the solid black. Also enable my transparency. You guys can see what the transparency is gonna look like. Now there is a filter called ramp. Generate ramp. Where are you? Generate ramp. Gradient ramp. Now what the generated gradient ramp does, it actually is a gradient filter. You're gonna say, okay, that's what you need. No, that's not gonna work. Because I want the layer to be transparent. I don't want to use a white, then I have to use a blending mode because it just mess things up. Because in 3D, the blend won't work. Do you remember the composition settings? Eventually, I'm going to use a Cinema 4D for rendering it, and the blending won't work. So if I use a white and try to blend it into transparencies, there's no go. So what I would do instead, I use a mask trick. I'll create a mask. Really weird one. By the way, this is too thick. I need to make sure the 400 is too much. 200 maybe? Yeah, it looks better. And also I need to adjust my composition size, my solid size. This has to be also 200 to fit. Perfect. I'm going to make a mask. This mask doesn't have to be anything special. Something like this will do. Uh-oh. Be careful. Make sure the layer is selected when you're making a mask. Otherwise, you are making a shape. There. Again, I'm not really sure what this thing is supposed to look like. The thing is, I need it far away from the edge because I'm going to apply a very large feather. I don't want an edge like this edge becomes feather. So how much of a feather do I want to apply? Oh, that's really depends on. I'm going to go for large. Not see it? That little edge appears there. This is because this edge is too close, eh? See it? There. So as I said, I'm not really sure where the edge is supposed to be. I just needed a rectangular shape, but I need to make sure my mask is very large. Something like this. Now another thing is, I don't want this edge to be visible. I want to I want to have an inner edge. So I'm going to make a new mask. I'm going to select this thing. And I'm going to make another rectangular mask in there because I need a frame around it. Something like this. Let me change the mask to color to something else. Yeah, looks good. As I said, I want this edge to also be transparent because remember, I'm going to apply some sort of blur filter to it later on. And if the edge is sharp like this, it's not going to look pretty good. So I'm giving myself a little bit of room to be able to adjust the edge. Adjusting the edge should be very straightforward for me. And this part, all I need to do is using some sort of mask magic. In mask, by default, masks add to each other. If I select the second one, for example, select subtract, as you can see, subtracts the top one. The thing is, I want to subtract the outer edge, not the inner. Well, you probably know what I'm going to do. I'm going to select invert. There we go. That's the trick. So two masks, one creates the gradient, the other one fixes the edge. Now, if I grab this shadow and bring it in, put it, for example, under the earth. The shadow, of course, is monster size, so I'm going to most likely scale it down a little bit. Like there. You guys can see it's transparent. The transparency, and by the way, the shadow is under the moon. So the transparency works really nicely here. And I don't need to blend it with anything. I mean, I can still blend it in here. For example, select the normal and use a multiply. I don't need to. Because again, the 3D we're going to use eventually may not work very well. So I'm going to use an option called opacity. With the opacity, I should be able to adjust how much of a shadow I want to apply. Also, this edge, if I want to feather this edge, I can go back to the shadows and feather this edge. I haven't done that yet. There. So when I go back, the edge is nice and feathered. See how the shadow look like? There will be, as I said, if you have a lot of these solar radiations, it will look good. It will look very cool. You have to have more than one. And then the rest is just a basic animation. We already animate the moon. You just need to put another shadow for the moon, and it just follows the moon, and next thing you know, it's done. I'm going to show you guys what the final project looked like. I usually teach this lesson for in a day in one of the advanced After Effects classes, and you will see there's a lot more steps in there. And since we have only 3 hours here, and I got to show you a couple of other things, I'm cutting the corners quite a bit here. I just want to make sure you guys understand how this thing look like. So I'm going to save this project, and I'm going to actually open the project with the solar radiation that I have on my lesson files, so you guys can see the final one. And Studio Tech 1 3 CC 2017. I think that's the one. Yep. Now look at it. There. I'm just going to play the animation, rendering it. You guys see the shadow? Of course, I stretch the shadow a little bit. The wave looks actually pretty good, and I have to admit that took a while to put those solar rays in there by a lot of copy paste and duplicate, and I used some layer blending. But because they're all duplicate from each other and all those little rays are lined up with the proper glow, it looked like these waves are coming out. These waves are literally the one we made earlier. And as you can see, the moon, it moves. The Earth, originally what I had in mind, the middle one was transparent. But don't worry about it. Inside the Earth layer, I could go and create a black solid at the end of it, just put it right in the bottom, and then it could make it into a black. So it doesn't have to be transparent. Same thing with the moon. I made them transparent so you guys could see it. But at the end of the day, you put a layer underneath of it. They use a lot of memory right now. I don't know how much memory my After Effects is using right now. 28 gigabyte. That's right, for this exercise. It's done. A little bit left, on my system. 4 gig left. This is what it looked like. You guys can see the star field photos on the back that I just animated. I just moved the star field. It's a big photo, so I just moved it. And that's what it looked like. It's a funny thing, it looks like an optical illusion, isn't it? With a solar wave. As you can see, these are layers I used. This is the most time consuming part. Not creating the sun, not creating the earth, creating this. This is the one that I skipped. Oh yeah, look how many layers I have to use. 106 layers I used. These are 106 layers of that wave that you and I made earlier. This one. That one. But if you duplicate them in this order and I place them like this, it took a while, by the way. It should look like radiating just like this. In the class, I only show a part of it to students because remember, this project, you will hit your memory limit, 28.2 gigabyte being used out of 32. You need a computer with a minimum 64 gig RAM to be able to play this thing properly. And I'm running at 25% or 50% quality, by the way. I cannot run it at full. At full, it will hit 64 gig limit, and my system works very, very slowly. So that's why in the class, usually I only teach students to just do maybe 20, 30 of these things. And then they can look at the final lesson file, how this solar radiation look like. The shadows, I stretched them a bit more. This shadow composition, there you go. That's what I show it to you. It's just basically two masks in there. That's how I did it. I couldn't remember it, to be honest with you. And I don't even remember the size of the composition. What is the composition here? 1672 by 261. I don't even know why I used those numbers before. So yeah, a lot of things I've done, don't really remember it. That's what the final project looked like. Now I got another 45 minutes. I just want to show you guys a couple of other things. A lot of students ask me about the Harry Potter stuff that I've done in the past and ask me, can you show me the Harry Potter part, some part of it. Just want to show you a few little things, how to make a texture for a text or make a text made of certain materials. I'm just going to start a new project. And I'm going to go to one of my old lesson files and grab few assets. I also need an EPS file. Yeah, that's what I need. All right. Let me reset my workspace. Perfect. I have a picture of a cracked concrete here, and I have another picture of a concrete. I personally like this one because there's a lot of cracks in there. It looks nice. And I have a text being made in Adobe Illustrator. I have the font, actually Harry Potter font. You can download it from internet. But the problem with this method is if I type it in Adobe After Effects, first of all, going to be a nightmare to type something like this. Because as you can see, the way the title is, the baseline is off. And notice that the O and the G are a little bit off. And then, and the prisoner of Alcatraz, I changed it from Azkaban. The thing is, every piece of it here has a little different baseline. In Adobe After Effects, you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers. So it's easier for me to do it in Illustrator than doing it in Adobe After Effects. Despite you can do it, but the question is why? I have EPS, so I will definitely use this thing. I'm going to go to composition, new composition at 1920 by 1080. 24 frames is fine. I'm going to call this thing title. Now, obviously, I put my EPS in the middle. Then I grab one of the cracked concretes and put it on top. I use a transparency, opacity, because I want to see it. And I want that little crack in the middle to be right in the middle of the font. What I would do is I'll go to my layer, transform, and I use the option flip vertical. Flip vertical actually do help a lot. Also, I can press W on my keyboard and I can rotate it. Then I press V and adjust it because I want that concrete to go to the blogger. Later, I'll grab the opacity and put it back to 100. I'll put the EPS file on top. If I use a method called track matte, alpha matte, the cracked concrete will appear inside the text, just like this. And we all know how that works. However, if I'm going to apply a bevel and emboss to this thing, the problem with it is this. The layer that makes the Larry blogger visible is the layer called title, EPS. But when you guys applying it with the track matte, you notice the layer on top is actually invisible. If I select the concrete, I can go to the layer styles, and select the bevel and emboss. And yes, it applies the bevel and emboss to the cracked concrete. I'm going to change it to chisel hard. And it does work. Okay. I got a better idea. Rather than applying it here, what I would do is I apply it to another EPS at the bottom. I'll show you what I mean. Notice that these are perfectly lined up. I select this one. Then I go to the layer, select layer styles, bevel and emboss. When I apply bevel and emboss to it, it works actually really well. I change it from smooth to chisel hard, and then I will increase the size. And then I increase the option called the depth to create the nice effect I want. There's a bug in Photoshop also when you use a chisel heart. It creates a little cuts in there. A smooth, it make it really awful, but when you select one of those chisels, I don't know why it does that. I'll leave everything else as is. I will just make my highlights slightly brighter, and I make the shadows slightly stronger. There. Now once I made this title, I use a method called, I enable the other one, and I use an option called overlay. If I select the overlay pass through the layer, then you can see the shadows and highlight passing through the concrete. I will go in here and I can actually readjust the depth or reduce the amount of shadow. You can sit down and play with this thing until you're happy with the result. I'll put it to default 75%, wasn't it? Yep. And here's the result. Now once I've done that, I have what I want. If I want to try a different one, for example, this cracked concrete, I can hide it, grab the other concrete, put it here, and I use that one as an alpha. Look. And I use this thing as an overlay. It doesn't matter. You like this? Actually, this marble looks better. I like this one better than the other one. Oh, that looks pretty weird. Yeah, you know what? Actually, I'll look at the marble one. This one looks nicer. Of course, in the movies, they just look a little bit made of stone, so it doesn't matter. If you like this this texture, you don't like the color, the yellow color, just simply select it and go to Effect, Color Correction, and select the option Tint. Tint will knock the color out anyway. So you have the gray version of it if you prefer that. Or you can select the white and make it more like a brown or any color you want. I can actually literally change the texture to anything I want by mapping the white to anything. So that makes it a lot easier for you to have a concrete with a hint of a red in there, and then reduce the amount so you can have a little bit of red to it if you wish. Now, if I want to create a 3D, that thing's gonna fly through the clouds. I need a new composition called, for example, I will call this thing final because it's a final project anyway. Will be in here. I'll grab a bunch of clouds I have. As you can see, these are just a picture of the clouds, not in a very specific thing, but these clouds, they have something in common. They're not just a normal clouds. These clouds, all of them, they have a darker edge around the outer area, darker, and they have a brighter white area right in the middle. So if you look at this one, sorry, shouldn't double click on that, double click on, look, darker area at the edge, a whiter in the center. Same thing with here. Same thing with here. Even this one has a little bit of white in the middle. I know the center looks too dark, but overall, they follow a certain procedure. I'm going to grab the cloud background, put it on the bottom. Now, do I need to fit it? I don't care. Because I'm going to create a camera in 3D, and I'm just going to move the camera forward. So I'm not going to scale it because it makes no difference. And here's a camera. New camera. The camera settings, I'm just going to call it camera 1, leave everything as is. I do not want a depth of field because once you're in flying in the cloud, the distances are so large, the depth of field makes no difference and makes no sense. I put it to 2-node camera. And okay, by the way, you could apply the same thing to the solar settings as well. The previous example I showed you guys. Now, if I want to fit these things, I will change my camera view to camera 1. All I need to do, go to the camera option, and notice that there's options as zoom. I can zoom into it. Or, oh, the layer has to be 3D, by the way, this layer. So that's the one option. I can zoom into camera. Look, I'm zooming in like a camera lens. Or I can leave the camera to default. Rather than zooming in, I can move the camera forward. The position. Back. Point of interest or position. Sorry, the position is Z, the depth. Because this is X position, means you're rotating the camera. So either way is okay. I'm most likely going to bring the camera forward because I don't want to play with the zoom. I'm going to lock the camera. I'll grab another cloud, put it on top of the cloud 1. This goes on top of it. Now, if I make it into a 3D layer, there are 2 clouds over each other. I'm going to show you this thing from a 2-view horizontal. This is what you see through the camera. This is what it looked like in top view, looking at it from a top. If I expand the layer, because this layer is a 3D, because I enabled the cube, the transform has 3 sets of numbers. Under the position, we know what the X and Y does, but the third number is the Z depth. You see it? I can move it back and forth in. Now, this doesn't make any sense to you guys, does it? This cloud, cloud 1, is on top of the other cloud. See? Excuse me. But if I use the positive depth, it goes under it. How's that possible? Look. This layer is on top, but appear on the bottom. Layers only works in 2-dimensional world. After Effects has a 3D option. So in 3D, layer doesn't make any sense. Layer only makes sense when you're dealing with a 2-dimensional. In third dimension, you move the object by adjusting the depth, the Z depth. So this is kind of weird for Photoshop users because you, or Illustrator, because you thinking in 2-dimensional. That's why we rely on the layers. Whatever layers on top appears on top, right? In 3D, whatever object has a negative depth is closer to you. So I will type -500 and bring it forward by -500 points. If I show you in 3D by going to the perspective rather than the top view to perspective, you guys can see it now. Let me orbit it. Do you see it now? How it look like? Now, if I reduce this thing and put it the other way around, is under it. It doesn't matter what layer is on top, what layer is on the bottom. It makes no difference because layer doesn't make any sense. The way I'm sorting it here is because try to help myself and help my students to understand what layer is on top, but really doesn't matter. I can literally sort them up or randomly place them as long as the Z depth. See? No difference. As long as the Z depth of this thing is a negative space. And I show you also how the large this cloud is, by the way. in contrast to the other one. I'll bring a new cloud, cloud number 2, put it on top of the other one. By default, cloud number 2 is not even visible here. Where is that? It's not even here because it's not a 3D. The moment I make it 3D, it appears right on top of it. Then I press on P and I type minus 1000. Sorry, minus 1000. Now you can see there are 3 of them. So why what I'm doing this thing, by the way, because in Harry Potter movies, the title flies through the cloud and the camera flies through the cloud. I try to create that effect. So I need to create a 3-dimensional layers, and the camera that I have will fly through them. You're wondering where the camera is? Here's the camera. See it? That's your camera. And when I move the camera forward and backwards, if you remember by the position, that's what I did. Look. I might move the camera back again a little bit. Then I have to scale the last picture, the cloud. I'll bring a last cloud in there, third one, I'll put it on top. I'll make it into a 3D. I'll press P and change it to minus 1500. Now this is on top of the other one, just like that. As you can see, these clouds don't have to be exactly same size. These are pictures I had to work with. So one of them is very, very large. The other one is a little bit smaller, but doesn't matter. The camera cannot really see through them anyway. So they look like this so far. I'm going to lock them all up and bring my title in. Again, the title doesn't matter where it is. Literally can be at the bottom or could be on the top. I'll put it under the camera and it appears right there. But if I make it into 3D, it disappears. Why? Because it's on top of the first one. See it? Right there. Now, the layer in this case might make any difference. Why? Because both of them have a Z depth of 0. See? If they're exactly in the same plane, then the layer makes difference. I will put this thing to minus 50. Because I don't want to, be too close. Just bring it a little bit more forward. And this is what I have so far. Obviously, I need to take a look at my screen. So I'm just going to change it to the one screen. Since you already understand what the whole point of this 3D business is, I'm just going to make sure all the layers are correct. And I need to blend them. For blending, I will grab all the clouds and I start with the cloud number 3 and I use an option called soft light. The moment I use a soft light, it blends. Then I grab another soft light. Then I use another soft light. Then I use another soft light. So all the layers are soft light except the title. Camera, of course, doesn't have anything. Now, most likely, the last one, you guys can see the edge. That doesn't look pretty good. And I don't want to move the camera. So I will have one choice. I'll press S to scale it. Now, be very careful, though. You don't want to scale it in Z depth. Doesn't matter. This is a razor thin. But it's a good idea to uncheck and just scale this thing to, let's say, 130. 130. There. And I leave the last one as is. and I'll link them again. This looks all right. Now I'll show you how to fly through the cloud. Now that's a very easy one. I'm going to select the camera. Camera has a lot of settings itself. If I enable the depth of field and select my aperture, select my blur level, then I can really adjust and make the text blurry or text pretty sharp. Now I'm not sure where the thing is. I need to see it from the side view. Right there. So that's the focus distance. I try to keep it like that. And then that's good. I should be all right with this thing. And I increased it. I'm not sure which one actually looks better. Usually the aperture and the amount of blur level you apply create a different depth of field. I'm going to reduce my aperture. Okay. And the blur level. So let's see if I adjust my focus distance, something happens. Yeah. See it? I'm controlling the blurriness by using a camera depth of field. Now if I show you guys the side view and the actual footage of the camera itself, this is a main camera and that's a side view. Look at this little pink line, pink box there. This thing. Notice that this is way away from the text. That's the focus point. If that thing lines up with the text, that's the text right there. The text becomes very sharp. Right there. Because the focus is on it. If I push it or pull it past that point, text becomes blurry because that's the depth of field is being passed through. If you watch the Harry Potter movies, there is no really depth of field in there, does it? That's why I turned this thing off originally. Also, you can adjust the aperture. For example, I can put this camera very, very gently in front of it. I know it's difficult to see. I'm going to bring my focus distance just slightly ahead of it. Then I can adjust my aperture. This becomes very sensitive now. Very little you move the camera, and I can adjust the depth of field. The beauty part of this thing, this exercise, especially this particular one, is I can literally focus on each individual cloud if I wanted to. I usually use the top view, sometimes easier to see it, because you can see this line, this pink line, not the other one. This one is the camera focus. See, the text is sharp, text is blurry. Sharp, blurry. I can use this thing to control how much I want it. If I want to focus on, for example, this cloud, I just need to bring it forward. Right now it's on that cloud, whatever the cloud is, this big cloud. It looks like a mess, isn't it? I better turn it off. So this is what it looked like from a top view. Now, as far as the flying through the screen, well, you can animate the zoom, or you can move the camera. The problem with the zoom is if I move the zoom, I cannot have a motion blur. But if I move the actual camera, I can create a bit of a motion blur. So what I would do is, I have a two option, point of interest and the position. So what's the point of interest in a camera? When you guys grab your phone, let me just create something like this. Just imagine you have a table, and on a table you have some shape. You grab your camera. You could be your phone, your real camera, could be anything here. And you point in a camera to that shape, whatever the shape is. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Could be a glass of water, could be literally a flower pot, anything. This. If you grab your camera and move the camera side to side or orbit around it, this spot that in the middle of the screen, you try to keep that shape, whatever object is at the center of a camera, by orbiting around it, is called the point of interest. Adobe After Effects displayed it by this little guy here. This is very useful, as I said, when you want to keep the Larry blogger in the middle of the screen and you want to orbit the camera around it, or you move around it by moving to the left, moving to the right. The camera position itself is this. That's the camera itself, this camera. Sometimes when you are keeping your camera on a tripod, your camera position is locked, but you're moving the point of interest because you're moving a camera by pointing it at elsewhere. For example, you are shooting a hockey game. Your camera is on a tripod and you're following the puck. That is, you're animating the point of interest of the camera. If you're following somebody down the hallway, then you are animating both of them, the point of interest and the position. That's why this is called a two-node camera. The two-node camera, when I made a camera originally, I choose the two-node camera because it has a point of interest and has the position. In this case, I don't want to touch the point of interest. But if I don't move the point of interest, what's going to happen is the position, as you're moving through the text, the camera can get twisted because this is a long camera and the camera has to be short, and I mess up the depth of field. In reality, if you're in a helicopter or an airplane and flying through the cloud, you're moving both of them, the point of interest and the position. So I need to animate both of them. Camera has to move in a one direction. So in this case, I go to the end of a timeline. I think my timeline was at 10 seconds, wasn't it? Yeah. And the number that I want to animate is a Z depth. It's kind of funny. The numbers are very, very similar. But the other one is minus 2700. The other one is 0. So I'm going to add sorry, what was the number I had there? Minus 27. So I'm going to type this number, 27, 25. I'm going to type 0 here, 27, 25. That's too much, isn't it? Well, at least you can see it's working. Yeah, camera goes to the 0. This one I type minus 27, 25. Minus 27, 25. Uh-oh, sorry, this is supposed to be plus 27, 25 because minus will flip the camera. Did I just type? Why this thing doesn't give me the positive one? I type it properly. 27, 25. Strange. I keep typing it and I remove the minus. It didn't work, so I had to retype it again. So look what happened to the camera now. When I'm animating the camera, this panel, the camera moved as a whole. See it? This is a proper way of doing it. Now, if I don't animate the point of interest, look what happens to the camera. It looks working, but your camera locked into point of interest. That's not a good idea, in my opinion, because what I want to do, I want to make sure the camera actually follows it properly. 27, 25. This. Now, in Harry Potter, the title doesn't fly right away in there. So what I need to do, I need to grab the camera and grab these two keyframes and move them like 3 seconds or something, because I want a title to start appearing, then I move. Obviously, this has to be easy ease in or easy ease out, actually. So the camera moves very slowly instead. So I don't need the two views anymore. And look how does this one look like. There. I can control the camera speed by going to the graph and looking at the speed of the camera motion. Obviously, I can control this thing by pushing and pulling the graph. I'm going to leave it as is. I don't want to make it as complex, and besides, I have only like 15 minutes to wrap it up. Something like this. Obviously, I want to animate the text as well, because text is also flowing to the screen. So the text should be easy. I just need a position keyframe. I basically go up to here and bring the text a little bit more forward. Funny is, by going to forward, I mean I have to type a negative number. Obviously, this is an easy ease out, and this is an easy ease, F9. Because text need to be moved slowly, and as you can see, it stops again and moves. Well, I will move this thing all the way to the end. Maybe I should just get rid of it first. Put it to the end. I go to the end of a timeline. And what I would do is I bring the text forward by a large number. I don't know how much at the moment, so sorry, I need to see it. I will go to the text and I make this thing really large. So the text fly. The reason I'm doing this thing because of a motion blur. If I don't do this thing with the text, there will not be a motion blur. Now the motion blur with the text will apply because the text now has some sort of velocity. There. Something like this. Look at the difference between a motion blur having or not. I can constantly playing with the numbers to make sure this is actually going really, really fast. Right there. Without the motion blur, with it. Now, obviously, animating a text is a little bit tricky because I want a text to stay very slowly and then moves very slowly again and passing through, just like that in movies. What I need to do though, I will go to the graph and the way the text moves, this is a speed of a text. I can grab it and pull it forward. This. Doing that, make the text moves very slowly. See it? And then accelerates. Now in reality, when you guys looking at something from very far, the object moves very, very slowly. Okay, let me talk about this thing here on a new composition. This is one of the problems with After Effects. If I grab a shape, doesn't matter what it is. I see the title, the text, the EPS one. If I animate the scale property, I'm not making it in 3D or anything. I'm just going to scale it. If I select this scale and put it to, let's say, 25%, and I make a keyframe, then I go somewhere else and I change the scale to, let's say, that much, 2,000%, 3,000, make it really large. And by the way, you guys gonna see this text looks horrible. That's supposed to be EPS. Yeah, if you could enable that option and make it sharp. So I haven't done that in the Harry Potter part yet. I know that's EPS, but this is renders a lot quicker. Something like this. But if you watch the video, you see something strange about it. Watch this video. Did you see that what happens? This is completely backwards than what a real world works. Watch again. Have you noticed the Larry Blogger going from 25% to 5,000% or 4,000%? It starts really small, suddenly gets very large, and it slows down. Notice that slowing down? Slowing down almost at the halfway. If I use a position and move the texts down here so you guys can see the letter, let's say fly through the letter B. That was a bad idea, wasn't it? Oh yeah, sorry, I just to put it back again. There, it's a little bit better. So look, when I'm playing it, this is what happens. It just slows down. In reality, you know what's going to happen, right? You've seen the cars, they're coming from far, they're very slow, but they're running really fast, and as they get closer to speed up. If I go to the curves and I select this scale, you'll see the scale is a linear. That's impossible in real world. The object should scale slowly, then accelerate. So I need to grab this scale, hold the Alt key, and I need to turn it like this. This is called exponential. This is what the real world look like. This is how it is, known as a logarithmic. See it? And then accelerates. I need to adjust the curve a little bit even more to make it more realistic. It still doesn't look right. So in Larry Blogger, I need to do this, otherwise the text doesn't look right. This moves slowly, then accelerates. There, flies through. A scale is one of those tricky things to do. But definitely with a position, I'm able to much more control it. You will see with the scale, I really have a hard time to get this thing right. I cannot scale it properly. That's one of the reasons I did not scale the Larry Blogger. I use a position in 3D to move it forward. Also with the clouds. So now you know why I actually used the position instead. Also, thanks to position, I can have the motion blur. Just like this. If I enable the option that you remember, there's an option here called collapse transformation. Collapse transformation supposed to make things look right, but there's a problem with the collapse transformation. Motion blur doesn't apply to it. Collapse transformation also having a bit of a hard time with the camera and some of the 3D stuff. So this is not gonna fly. It's not like this one that I can go back and enable this option and make the text very sharp. Limitation, right? You never know. So in this case, I have to use it this way. One last thing I'm going to show you because I wrap it up for today is in Larry Blogger text or Harry Potter, the text starts behind the clouds in the back. So I want a text to fly through the clouds. So I'll grab this thing called background cloud and I duplicate this layer. It has to be duplicated. No way around it, and has to be a normal, by the way. I will call this thing, you know what? I will call this thing Cloud BG Matte. This is a cloud background matte and has to be under the text. You know what? Actually, I'll put it above the text, the title. If I turn it into a two-dimensional layer from a 3D, it blocks very much everyone. Now, the next step, I will use an option called the Luma for the title under the track matte because I don't want to use the text. I don't want to see the cloud through the text. I want to see the text through the cloud. So I'm using a Luma because the cloud doesn't have an alpha. When I do that, it looks like this. Now, if you look at this layer, look what it looks like, the cloud covering and blocking part of it. I want some part of this cloud to be completely transparent and some part to be completely covering the text. The reason it doesn't look good because this cloud is not exactly made of a black and white. It has a lot of gray in there. So in order for me to fix it, I will use a filter called exposure. Anything in here can work as long as you can adjust it. I use usually exposure because exposure is a simple one to use. Exposure, I can increase the exposure. See it? Or I can decrease it. Also have an option called offset. And I have an option called gamma. So think about it. By animating these properties, I should be able to make a text appears behind a cloud. Look. So let me do the animation. Let me double check one thing first. This is good. This is good. Yeah, I think I only need to animate the offset. So I enable the keyframe for offset and go forward somewhere like this. And I just basically put the offset to 1. And now look. Guess what happened? Obviously, I need to adjust and synchronize the shortcuts. So I'll press U on my keyboard. U will display everything. As you can see, the text moves here, so I can push the text backwards, and I line up these two keyframes with the text. So as the text moves forward, it starts appearing. Or I can push these guys more forward. I can bring the camera backwards. Again, this is a matter of playing with the keyframes to get this thing right. Like this. Maybe I should just put this thing right here at the very beginning as it flies in. Yes, that looks better, isn't it? Now, as far as the edge goes, let's take a look what I just did with this guy anyway. With this guy. Look at it. This is what I've done to it. With exposure. Exposure filter, what it does, I made it into a 0 because exposure, I made it into a very dark one and then gradually goes back to the normal one and then becomes white. So the rule of the track matte is you see the text through the white, you don't see the text through the black. Therefore, you only see it through the little bit of gray and eventually see the text fully. Anything is black is invisible. the end result is look like this. If you want to adjust the edge of a cloud to make it more feathery, not a problem. Just make sure you select this layer, BG matte, apply a blur, fast box blur. This, see, can feather the edge if you want to. Because what I'm doing, I'm just blurring the cloud, right? Something like this, maybe 2 or 3. The difference is the cloud, not sharp, more like a real cloud now. So when I play it, it looks like this. Couple of things, I know we are out of time, just want to mention in here. If I look from the top view, you guys remember the camera passing through each cloud, right? See, right here, camera passed through the first cloud. In here, you might see something really weird on the screen. The screen becomes right there. It looks like you're passing through a layer. Well, you can just simply go find out where exactly the top view show it to you. Right here, the camera is about to pass through the first cloud. Just find the cloud 1. Nope, that's cloud number 3. Just press T, the opacity, and as the camera gets close, just put the opacity to 0. You're basically making the cloud invisible as you're flying through it. Simple as that. So a few tricks you can just do this thing to make this thing looks very decent. Like this. You don't see it anymore. Hope you guys enjoyed this session today. There was a lot of things I had to talk about, especially some of the filters like a fill and a stroke and glow and how to create a waves, stuff like that. Usually I don't teach those things in a basic and advanced After Effects class. I only teach it for the Studio Techniques class. And this is the one spot I teach in the advanced class, but I done it slightly different today and to show you more in-depth explanation, because some of you taking the other class with me, the After Effects Advanced, I just ask you to follow me because usually it's the end of the day. We have to do this exercise more in depth, so I don't usually explain it as much. I just want to make sure you guys get the idea about the 3D, the camera, the track mat, and how the filters work. Tomorrow I have 2 more sessions with Adobe After Effects. Hope I see you guys in those for motion tracking and the composition one. Otherwise, have a good day and you take care. I'll see you guys tomorrow.